Matt, welcome to the show. We appreciate you. I'm hipping Matt to Sensational Sherry right now. Is
That's who.
Matt is a wrestling fan, but he's he's a child, much like Jesse, and so we're hipping him to a new era of wrestling.
She looks like who the characters or the actors for the Broadway Cats were based off of. Like that's what she looks
kind
like.
Of her style. That was her makeup style.
That was always her style. Yeah.
All right. Well,
when we were trying to figure out who else she was with, how could we forget she was with the Harlem Heat? Right there with one of the great promos of all time.
Oh, indeed. And again, all the more credence that I think Cher was full of culture.
So I YouTube, because I want to see more on Cher. Like I want to know who she is. I saw her Hall of Fame speech just 20 seconds ago.
Yeah, looks a little different.
Yeah, I don't know if she was.
You know what the crazy part was? She was pretty young in the Hall of Fame. Like she just didn't, that's why she's no longer with us, unfortunately.
She's no longer with us?
No, she's not.
Oh,
no.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Locked On Wrestling here, host Matt George with us on ESPN 1320. How you feeling headed into tonight's second game against Utah?
Truth be told, I can't shake the feeling. I'm trying to get rid of it because I like being optimistic better. But the Kings have done a good job through these first 6 games. What a low freaking bar. The Kings have done a good job to avoid a blowout. Tonight feels like a blowout coming. Like I don't know why. And maybe a blowout doesn't necessarily have to be like a 25-point loss, but I don't think the Utah Jazz are a good matchup for the Sacramento Kings at all, period. And I think the Kings had their best shot at Utah in the home opener, and they pretty much blew it. And I don't know if they're going to be able to get Joe Ingles or maybe they can get like Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell kicked out of this game this time, and maybe that'll help them. Although I don't want Davion Mitchell to people don't talk about this enough, and I remember watching it over and over again on opening night. Davion Mitchell came inches away from hitting the floor head first. Like people talk about he was going up to try and catch a body, and he absolutely was on that dunk attempt. But Ingles took out his legs, and if you watch, Davion catches himself with his hands. Go back and watch and just pay attention to how close his forehead gets to the hardwood. It's like it would have been really, really bad had he not caught himself. So Davion said that he didn't think that Ingles meant to do it and deserved to be ejected, but just with how close he came to getting a serious head injury, I think he did just based off of that alone.
He absolutely needed to be ejected. I'm not sitting there saying that Ingles was like, I'm going to take out Davion Mitchell, but I mean, it was a reckless, careless play. And just not paying attention to what's going on. And somebody, like you just mentioned, Matt, could have got really, really hurt.
Yeah, so I don't know why. I have this weird feeling that tonight is gearing up to be a bit of a blowout for the first time for the Kings. And maybe blowout could mean first double-digit loss for the Kings. Have they lost by double digits at any point? Oh, did they lose by 10 to like the Warriors for no reason at the very end? Like
was the Jazz game a 10-point loss?
Okay, so it didn't feel like that, but it ended up being that. So okay, like I'm talking
a 4-point game with like a minute and a half.
Well, it was 110-101.
Okay.
It was 9.
I got you.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like tonight's gearing up to be like a 15-point loss. And maybe the Kings don't play that bad and the Jazz just beat them by 15 plus because the Jazz are that good, at least of a regular season team. But that's how I'm feeling. I'm trying to shake it out. Maybe now that I've spoken it into existence, I can jinx it from happening and the Kings can get a win. This would be one hell of a night for De'Aaron to step up and show up. And even then, maybe it won't be enough. But I mean, they played the Jazz really, really well in Sacramento in the home opener, and that still wasn't enough. So good luck doing that in Utah, which is historically a very difficult place to play.
Let me ask you this real quick. Both of you guys, let me ask you guys a question. Let's get crazy right here. Kings win this game tonight. Is that enough to make like people believe like, yo, they're different this year? I know it's early. I know there's a lot of other moments, but because I have the same feeling as you, Matt. Like I'm not overly confident about tonight. I'm not sure how Damian feels about it, but this just seems like a tall task. But if they went into Utah at the end of a road trip and coming off of a loss and everybody kind of feeling this same way and went in there and snatched the win out to go 3-1 on this 4-game road trip, would it be like, yo, I think this year really is different now?
I'm going to say no, and here's why. because there is not a single person who has watched Kings basketball for the last 15 years that would have any confidence going into tomorrow night's game against the New Orleans Pelicans at home if the Kings did beat the Utah Jazz. Because second out of a back-to-back, a team that they should be beating at home, that just perfectly smells, hey, the Kings are set up perfectly and they drop the ball. And hey, they might even do that after a Utah Jazz loss tonight. Like, I have more, my sights are more set on tomorrow night. Not that I'm folding on this game and I want Luke Walton to treat this game that way. It is definitely winnable based off of what we saw in the home opener. But tomorrow night's game, man, that it smells like a trap. It smells like a classic Kings walk into their home building with a little bit of a swagger because they beat the Pelicans in their building last week, and they're back home and no Zion. Oh, we got this, and punched in the mouth. And anyone who's watched Kings basketball for the last 15 years knows why many of us probably feel that way.
You two suckers are scarred.
Yes.
Y'all live in the pain of the last 15 years through this next 2-game stretch. Now, Utah is a tough team. And one thing that I just, these types of things sit in my head, and I don't exactly know how many games in a row it's been, but I know it was 3 last year and it's 1 this year. Utah's got the Kings number. At some point, the Kings got to get one. Why not tonight? Talking about blowouts and double-digit losses. No, come on. This team knows that they've hit the wall with the Utah Jazz. Y'all suckers are scarred. I'm going Kings win tonight. I'll be the optimistic one.
I'm not mad at that. And I'll also say this. There needs to come a time when we don't need to be scared of playing against other top teams. You know, we go down the schedule and we say, oh, man, it's tough. Got to go to Utah. I don't know. We need to get it. We need to get off that. We need to get off that. Now, I'm not. I don't. That doesn't change the fact that I don't have a great feeling about tonight. But I would love for this team to not only be like, not only are we here to compete, we're here to win. We're going to win tonight. I love for this team to feel that way.
Utah's 5-1 with the biggest point differential in the entire league. They got a 12.9. Sorry, check that. It's the second largest. Miami has the highest. Miami's point differential is plus 17.
Oh, Miami's balling this year.
Utah is 12.9.
I respect it though, D'Lo. Play the law of averages and hope that'll cash in for you. I respect it.
A little less optimistic than I was before I saw that 12.9 point differential. Goodness gracious. First-year head coach Quinn Snyder's killing it out there. That's a joke. That's a joke for those who have been listening long term. The Kings have been in, and I guess what it boils down to is like it ties into what you were just talking about. The Kings, they haven't been blown out this year. And we take the small victories, right? Sitting at 500, the 3-3, they haven't been blown out. But at some point in these close games, whether it's, the first one against Utah, they had an opportunity to take that one. They were in the Warriors game pretty late. We all saw the game against Dallas. Like they had an opportunity to get that one until the Luka Doncic logo shot. This team's got to be able to close out games. And there was a stretch at the very, very beginning of last year where Tyrese Halliburton was the closer. Like he was very early in his rookie career. He was in there in the fourth quarter. He was Mr. Fourth Quarter. Then along came the end of the season and De'Aaron Fox playing at this, superstar level. While De'Aaron has gotten all of the heat, like Tyrese is missing from action in the fourth quarter too. Like someone in that closing lineup, we've made so much about who's going to close the game, has got to step up and be able to close these close games against good teams.
No, the attention is always going to be on De'Aaron Fox, and rightfully so, because he's the spotlight. He's the guy that Luke Walton calls the head of the snake every literal opportunity that he gets. So naturally,
and he makes $170 million.
Yeah, he makes that much money too. And naturally, if he's scoring only 14 points like he did in a winnable game against the Dallas Mavericks, people are going to pay attention to that. The fact that he's in the last 3 games put up either high teens or low to mid 20s in field goal attempts, but only hit single digits. I think you mentioned earlier in the show, someone pointed out that he has more field goal attempts than he has points scored so far this season. Like that jumps tremendously off the page, but you're absolutely right. Tyrese Halliburton hasn't been great. You look at the 3-point shooting percentage of everybody not named Harrison Barnes or Buddy Hield, it's absolutely abysmal. Terrence Davis has been horrific coming off the bench, and he's supposed to be the second best 3-point shooter on this Kings team. But it's I think it's more than that. Like what I notice offensively with the Sacramento Kings, it's a very similar trend to what we saw in the Dave Yeager season, right? When the Kings got off to that really, really hot start. They were getting out in transition. They were scoring. They were surprising teams. They were tiring teams out. But in the second half of the season, teams recognized, okay, force the Kings into the half court a little bit, and they lose their way. It's the same thing so far in these 6 games. 3 quarters, the Kings are using their defense, getting out in transition. Defense is turning into offense. They get to the fourth quarter. Teams know how to clean things up a little bit, not make nearly as many mistakes. Kings are dribbling the ball up the floor a lot slower, forced into half-court offensive sets, and still they don't look like they necessarily know what to do. Their playbook looks like it goes as far as, unless it's an out-of-bounds play. Out-of-bounds plays, for some reason, the Luke Walton playbook for out-of-bounds plays always seems to do really well. But half-court offense in the fourth quarter is, okay, Rashawn, high pick and roll, everybody else spread out, and oh crap, that didn't work. Well, let's do it again. We got 16 more seconds on the shot clock. Like that's pretty much what it looks like in the fourth quarter. So yes, De'Aaron needs to step up more. Yes, you need more from Tyrese Halliburton. You need more from everybody not named Harrison Barnes and to some extent Buddy Hield, at least their 3-point shooting percentage. But as a whole, the half-court offense for the Sacramento Kings come fourth quarter time, they look lost, they look confused, and quite honestly, they look very, very easy to guard.
Well, I'll say this, though, about that, Matt, is that's typically the fourth quarter offense of every NBA team. The difference is their best players make the shots. I mean, the fourth quarter offense for the majority of teams is find the switch that you want, get the pick and roll, get the switch, and then let your best guy go on this weak defender.
So why do the Sacramento Kings have such a hard time defending it then if everybody does it? Like, that's my question. Because defensively, they're not reinventing the wheel, and the Kings do well guarding it for 3 quarters. You get to the fourth quarter, though, and suddenly they can't stop the same pick and roll that they're trying to run. Like, that concerns me.
Because they don't have the guys. Like, they don't have the guy. They got one guy that can create off the bounce, and that's De'Aaron Fox. And he is either not making shots or he's reluctant to force the issue.
But at the same time, too, the Golden State Warriors played the majority of their fourth quarter with Steph and Dre on the bench, and the Kings couldn't stop them. So it's a fourth quarter issue as a whole. Like we've talked about, KC, and all of us have talked about, like, the bar is so low with the defense, but rightfully so. The defense has done enough for a whole game to put you in a position to win. That's when you need your guys, to your point, KC, to step up. But the defense has dropped off in the fourth quarter, as expected, because good teams know how to score and how to calm down and settle down. We saw it with the Utah Jazz and Sacramento, and they know how to clamp down on the defensive end too. So it just looks like the Kings, like, something works for a while and then it stops working, and they don't know what to do at that point. Like that, there's not what's next. There's not a plan B, and a lot of good teams either have a plan B, or they have a guy, to your point, KC, that can make the plan A work even if it's defended well. And the Kings don't have either at the moment.
All I heard from Matt George, the host of the Locked On Kings podcast, in that beautiful breakdown of the Kings in the fourth quarter, was that you don't like Luke Walton.
Oh, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. Actually, I'm higher on Luke Walton than I think a lot of people are. I think Luke and his coaching staff have done a good job. If you look at how bad the team was defensively, now a lot of it's personnel based too. I think I give credit to Luke Walton. Sometimes his rotations are questionable. He makes decisions like putting Fox and Halliburton on the bench at the same time. They're decisions that Walton makes that I'm confused about. And
I was being a bit facetious with that line, but I don't want to go too far back from it, because you were talking about on the offensive end how just run a high pick and roll with Sean. Okay, it doesn't work. I don't know. Try it again. Either Luke has to take control of that offense, or an assistant, or Alvin Gentry, or somebody over there has to do. or someone on the court has to.
Mm.
Like it seems like, and I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that's more the message that you were going for, is that no one is taking over in this fourth quarter to try to get a more functioning offense going.
Yeah.
Or adjusting to these good teams, who are adjusting their defense.
And Luke Walton and his coaching staff certainly aren't blameless, but at the same time, too, this is an issue that's happened regardless of head coach, even regardless of personnel over the last 15 years. Kings had the same issue in the fourth quarter when Dave Yeager was a head coach. Mike Malone was the only guy to figure it out, and he got fired for it, I guess. So, I mean, that's pretty much been the case. So I do agree that Luke Walton and the Kings coaching staff, they have to take control of it or settle the Kings down. But like you said, too, there has to be a guy on the floor that's actually executing. De'Aaron Fox is supposed to be that guy, and he hasn't. Somehow this Kings team is still 3-3, despite the fact that De'Aaron hasn't been executing, which I could spin into a positive, but I'm tired of moral victories, so I won't.
I'll also say this. What you're saying is correct. The offense looks a little spotty at times, and they look confused on what they need to do from time to time. But there are also other times when they're getting wide open shots and just clanking them. Like there was at least 3 different shots in the Dallas game, just wide open threes. Tyrese, De'Aaron, Buddy missed one. Harris, like wide open shots, and they're not knocking down shots. So, you can, even if they had the greatest offense in the world, if they get you wide open and you're not hitting the shot, it don't really matter. So they're going to have to shoot the ball better as a whole, not just one person or anything like that, but as a whole, they're going to have to start hitting some shots when they're open.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the 3-point shooting percentage in that Dallas Mavericks game, the Kings went like 7 of 30 something. I mean, that's probably not going to happen on a nightly basis, but also the Kings in the past, that would have buried the Kings to where they would have lost by 15 plus points. The fact that the defense was solid enough and the Dallas Mavericks didn't look that great to where they still had a chance to win that game, even with that terrible of a 3-point shooting percentage, I think works in the Kings' favor in an argument. I think that's telling. But yeah, if the Kings are shooting that poorly from 3-point range, they're probably not winning on any given night, to your point. They got a lot of good looks in that game, Casey.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the Matt George meter on De'Aaron Fox right now?
It's a great question. You're welcome. You always do. I'm not at the point of concern. And Casey and I talked about this on my most recent podcast. I'm not at the point where I'm concerned because I look at De'Aaron's full body of work and I put more weight into that than I do a bad stretch to start the season. And I love what Jason Jones said on your guys' show yesterday. If this was in the middle of the season, it'd just be a cold stretch. Since it's at the start of the season, it carries extra weight to it. And especially when guys like John Moran are doing their thing, it carries extra weight to it. So I'm not concerned or panicking yet with De'Aaron, but I will say where I'm at, which is different, is when the Kings pay De'Aaron Fox a max contract, which is year 1 of his max contract, they're not just paying him to get them to the playoffs via the play and end that playoff drought, and then they're throwing a parade for that. That's step 1. They're paying him that kind of money, committing that kind of money to him because they believe that he could be a star player on a, at worst, deep playoff team, at best, championship team. And I think all of us to this point have thought, okay, they're a ways away from it, but De'Aaron can be that dude. We believe De'Aaron can develop into that dude. This is the first time in De'Aaron Fox's Sacramento Kings career where the little whispers in my head are, maybe he's not that dude. Maybe he can be 1B, but he's not 1A. I think, and that's where I'm at. And I'm not extreme diving into that pool. I'm just dipping my toe in a little bit. For the first time, I have those whispers, and that stands out to me.
You're not allowed to hang out with Kenny Caraway. He's got them same whispers in his ear, man. We're gonna have to separate you two.
I'm just saying, man. Look, I'm still holding out hope, but I'd be lying if I said the little doubt didn't creep into my head. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know if Fox has it. And what I've said a number of different times, Matt, is it's not necessarily the skill. You know what I mean? But while, he's got to shoot better and things of that nature. I talked about it today. It's the relentlessness or lack thereof that worries me. me and Damian talked about it today. Damian and I talked about it today. We don't know what De'Aaron Fox we're getting tonight. Whereas with Dame Lillard or John Morant, Russell Westbrook, if they get challenged in any way, we're pretty sure they're coming out, gunning for people's necks the next time out. I don't know if we're getting that from Fox. He's had 2 days of, I'm sure the team has heard it, or, his team, Team Fox, Family First. They've heard some of the things that have been said over here, whatever the case may be. Should fire De'Aaron up. I don't know if it'll fire him up. He might look at it like, it's whatever. You don't know what he's talking about. I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. No, don't keep doing what you're doing. Be better.
Well,
I don't know if he has that. I don't know if he has that type of killer instinct that I'm looking for.
We've heard a lot of people say over the years that De'Aaron Fox plays his best when he plays pissed off. And it's accurate. And we almost want De'Aaron to play pissed off more because that's when he has his performances like dropping 30 or 40 points last season and capping it off with a tomahawk dunk to where he's screaming as loud as he can at the cardboard cutouts in the front row. Like that's what we saw from De'Aaron last season.
But what triggered him to be pissed off there, though?
I don't know. But when De'Aaron plays,
I'll take credit for that.
Oh, that's right. That was the day that's the Kenny Caraway game. That's right.
Okay, so either Kenny Caraway or Tim Maxwell will claim on Twitter that they pissed off.
Tim Maxwell pisses everybody off.
The Bleacher Report, they love him.
Yeah,
they do.
Either way, like it's accurate. When De'Aaron has a chip on his shoulder or something happens, it brings out that best out of him. But people are wondering, okay, what if that doesn't happen? Like what does it take to get him to that level? And I think that's concerning, KC, that De'Aaron has to get to that level to be at his best. I mean, I know Michael Jordan used to have to lie to himself and tell himself that a narrative was one way to piss himself off to become MJ. I don't know if De'Aaron Fox needs to do that or adopt that mentality, but by year 5, is he in year 5 or year 6? Year 5.
Year 5.
Yeah, by year 5, I would expect a player to be able to know when to tap into that skill regardless of your emotion. And we still haven't seen maybe complete mastery of that from De'Aaron.
We saw 3 different versions of De'Aaron Fox last year, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. Like we all remember the finished product, but we saw the first, and it was limited to be fair. I think it was the first 13 games. He was about 18.5 points per game. And then he hit a stretch where he was averaging about 22 points per game. Then he had that phenomenal final little less than 2 months of the season where he was averaging 27 points per game. Which one is De'Aaron Fox? Which one of those portions of last season is actually, the player that the Kings signed to that big extension?
I really think it is the 27. Like, I really, truly think that is De'Aaron Fox. And I remember the 18-point stretch, the struggling, the trying to figure it out. And hey, maybe that's the stretch that he's in right now. What I remember most about the 22, 23-point stretch is Fox was coasting to 22, 23 points a game. Like, it didn't seem like he was in De'Aaron Fox takeover mode. When he did get into De'Aaron Fox takeover mode, that's when we saw how good that he could be. The difference between last season and this season is the Kings needed him to be that for them to have a chance. This season, we've seen already through 6 games, they don't need De'Aaron to be takeover De'Aaron Fox for the team to have a chance to win. They're 3-3 without that to this point, and they've been in every single game without that to this point. Now, had they had that in addition to what they have, maybe they're 6-0 at this point. I think that's what that seems like a stretch, and that seems like wishful thinking to predict this team being undefeated through 6 games. The point is that without De'Aaron being he loves Dragon Ball Z, so I'll put it this way: without that Super Saiyan mode of De'Aaron Fox that we've seen, the Kings are still in games, which is a credit to the rest of the team, a credit to the defense getting better. And now that has us all knocking on Fox's door like, hey, when's that side of you going to come out? Because the table's set for you to completely take over a game. And when winning time is there for you on a nightly basis to take over and to be that dude, and you haven't been that dude yet.
My man, Damian Barlin, he brought up an interesting point yesterday. And I said, I'm not there yet, but I'll ask you, are you concerned about Mo Harkless at the 4?
We talked about this on the pod, KC. I think Luke Walton needs to consider how Mo Harkless and his poor three-point shooting. Rashawn Holmes is phenomenal. You're not taking him out of the starting lineup, but he doesn't space the floor. I think Luke Walton needs to consider how floor spacing is potentially playing a factor in De'Aaron's struggles. Because even if Marvin Bagley wasn't playing a lick of defense, at least last season, he developed somewhat of a consistent outside shot where you could play him on the perimeter and teams had to respect it a little bit. They weren't closing out aggressively like it was Buddy Hield, but there was spacing there. Mo Harkless was given 2 or 3 in the first quarter alone, open looks from the corner or wing 3. He didn't make a single one of them. I know that you're not looking for offense from Mo Harkless. I have full confidence in Mo Harkless on a nightly basis as that consistent wing defender that the Kings are looking for. But your starting 4 can't average or score 2 points combined in 2 games. Like that can't happen. You need more out of that, especially when he's getting the looks that he's getting alongside De'Aaron Fox. So I'm not there yet. I'm not at replace Mo Harkless yet. And I'm certainly not going to take all of De'Aaron's struggles and put that on Mo Harkless and deflect the blame elsewhere, because that's not fair. I think Harkless plays his role well. But spacing I see as an issue because De'Aaron has been trying to attack the basket, and we've seen 2-3 defenders converge on him every time. And what's different with De'Aaron this season is he is sometimes making the right pass, and we've seen games where he's had 8 or 9 assists, but he's also making the wrong passes. And D'Lo pointed out last time that I was on the play against the Warriors, I think it was, where he just chucked the ball up into the air because he had nowhere else to go. Like those are those parts are what I'm confused about with De'Aaron. Those are the mental mistakes that we haven't seen De'Aaron really make since his rookie season. That to me is almost more concerning than him trying to battle through 3 guys in the paint.
Matt George, host of the Locked On Kings podcast, with us here on D'Lo and KC on ESPN 1320. What is the team's like? Because you talked about Mo Harkless, and I appreciate the way you laid that out. Because James Ham and Jason Anderson told me I was an idiot for being concerned about this in the most polite way possible. Just the absolute, like, if you were, Jason was my favorite. Are you really worried about Mo Harkless right now? I was like, I got some questions. I was looking for flaws in the team, besides pointing the finger at De'Aaron Fox and saying all of these different things are wrong. So with him, I was trying to look at the team as a whole. So I'll ask you that similar question. What is the biggest flaw with the Sacramento Kings right now through 6 games into the season?
I think it's fourth quarter execution on both ends, period. So it's not all on one guy, but the axe falls heaviest on De'Aaron Fox for that, just because of his status with the team. But to kind of direct this question in another way, what KC and I talked about on the podcast, the question that I posed, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, D'Lo, is do the Kings take a look at Terrence Davis and his complete lack of production off the bench? Walton likes to run a 9-man rotation. He really uses 10 guys, but he alternates Alex Len and Tristan Thompson in that final spot based off of matchup. So it's going to be Alex Len tonight more than likely, because he's going against Rudy Gobert.
An Alex Len night, baby.
Exactly. But Tristan Thompson played very well against the Dallas Mavericks, which was great to see, because I think he's better than what he's shown. But it's really a 9-man rotation, and Terrence Davis is a big important part of that. He led the Kings in scoring during preseason. We know he's a streaky player. I asked him about his streakiness, and he says that's something that he's been working on, but he is still streaky. And right now he's an extreme cold streak where he's shooting less than 20% from 3-point range. Do you consider, with his struggles, moving him out of the rotation? And if so, is Marvin Bagley the best replacement for him, because the team is struggling to score, and Marvin can put up offensive numbers? It's a risk defensively, and maybe you lose some of that defensive presence off the bench that's kept you in these games when offensively you've been struggling. Do you consider that? Or maybe Chimezie Metu, who played really well last season, or, as KC brought up in the podcast, Louis the King. Like, do you start looking at this potentially?
The answer to every question is Metu, by the way, here on D'Lo and KC. We always go with Metu.
Stand up.
I don't have a problem with Marvin playing at this point, though I do understand why Luke doesn't. We've said this, we said this after the preseason injury situation. I don't care about the tweets and all of that other stuff. Like, if you think Marvin can help you win games, then put him out there on the floor, especially in the Terrence Davis role, where we're talking about a limited role. I don't think Terrence has warranted losing his job yet. it appears we're getting closer to that. It appears we're getting closer to him falling out of the rotation. It's like it feels like Marvin might be the break glass and type of emergency or break glass in case of emergency situation.
Right.
I'd always said, like, I understand why Luke doesn't put him in the rotation, because if he does play well and you get into a situation where you rely on him, right, and then he gets hurt, it's like, okay, now you got to put Terrence Davis back in. Now you're constantly having to make an adjustment. The one time we saw Marvin Bagley was in a game in which Mo Harkless was out and Terrence Davis's role was different. You asking me, no, I don't have a problem with it. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I do not. Barring an injury specifically to Mo Harkless, I don't think Marvin Bagley's playing for the Kings.
And I wonder,
he's continuing in his role.
And I wonder too, if, knock on wood, something were to happen to one of the pair of Alex Len and Tristan Thompson, or maybe even both of them, is it Chimezie Metu that's ahead of Bagley next off the bench in that scenario for those big man minutes? Like, I wonder this. I wonder who's next in line.
That's exactly it.
It's not. It's Bagley.
Right. Like, he didn't,
play. Bagley stepped in.
Luke didn't go to Metu when Mo was out against Utah. Like, he went to, you mentioned one or the other, maybe in a combination of guys, maybe multiple guys are out. Maybe we get to a situation where, it's got to be Mo Harkless plus. I can't envision this. It would have to be Tristan Thompson. Like, it would have to be a Tristan Thompson game. I feel like Alex Len could step in for Tristan Thompson, but maybe Tristan Thompson can't step in for Alex Len in certain situations based off kind of what we figured out here, or what we think we figured out through the first 6 games of the season. I don't know. They're obviously not as reluctant to play Marvin as I originally thought. It's just, it's going to take a specific person being out of the lineup for him to get in there.
Yeah,
and I guess we're not going to get any hashtag Freeport time this year, which is sad for all of us.
If there's any chance a change to Luke Walton's rotation in the immediate future, that's what I see it being Terrence Davis over Mo Harkless, because Mo Harkless is still playing his role. Even if he's struggling offensively, he's still playing his role. Terrence Davis's role is a microwave scorer off the bench who can also give you a sprinkle of defense and a sprinkle of ball handling and facilitating, and he's doing none of it. Period.
And so, but the thing with Mo Harkless is he's not necessarily struggling offensively. He's just not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he's 0 of 7. He's like 0 of 1.
Right.
Like, he's got the Herbert Jones role for the Sacramento Kings. Like, he's just out there. He does his job, and his job isn't to take a lot of shots.
But watch tonight. I think it's going to be Bojan Bogdanovic that guards him. Watch how much Mo Harkless's man on defense helps against De'Aaron Fox or whoever's attacking the basket. Like, that stood out to me a lot in Dallas. And maybe it was just one game, but teams know that they can sag off of Harkless. They're going to take that gamble because the majority of the time Harkless isn't going to hit that shot. Now, if Harkless could get that percentage to like mid-30s, then at that point I'm like, okay, I'll live with it, even if he has a bad night from time to time. But you just can't get nothing out of that position, or it's 4-on-5 offensively every time down the floor. And that kills someone like De'Aaron, who looks for mismatches and tries to use his speed to catch guys napping.
Well, Kenny. I'm watching Mo Harkless super close tonight because James and Jason made me feel bad.
The microscope will be on him for sure.
100%.
Matt, we're gonna have. I'm gonna ask you something. Look, man, we're all just on here talking. We're talking about the Kings. If you say 4-0 and they go 0-4, it's not your fault, okay? But when we talk to you on Tuesday, Kings would have played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games since then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where do you see this team at? They're 3-3 right now. 5 games later, when we talk to you on Tuesday, what are you realistically hoping they're looking like at that point?
So I have to remember the order of opponents, because I predict that's
New Orleans.
The Spurs are last, right? The Spurs are.
I think the Suns are the last one.
Suns are last, and then Spurs are after. Because I remember talking about this. I looked at the upcoming schedule, and I predicted after 12 games the Kings would be 6-6. So I will say, to go with my prediction, then I think the Kings are 5-6 by the time when we're talking next week. I think the Kings are beating Indiana. I think they're they're beating one of Indiana or Charlotte, but I like the way LaMelo Ball and the Charlotte Hornets are playing. I can't wait for Friday night's game. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to be able to go to the game or not, because I want to watch, because LaMelo Ball is just phenomenal, and I haven't gotten to see him in person yet. And I just like that Charlotte team a lot, period. So that could be a coin flip. They're winning one of those two games at home between Charlotte and the Pacers. I think they're losing to the Suns. I think they're losing tonight to Utah. I think they're beating New Orleans. And then whatever the fifth team is in there, I think they lose, but they beat the San Antonio Spurs at I think it's at home to wrap up the next 6 games. So I think, to answer your question in a weird way, they're 5-6 on Tuesday, but they're 6-6 by the end of this stretch. I think they're 500 after 12 games.
Okay.
The Spurs are actually Wednesday. It's the Jazz, the Pelicans, the Hornets, the Pacers, and the Suns, with the Spurs coming up a week from tomorrow.
Okay, so it's 5. It's gonna be 5-6 on Tuesday, but they will beat the Spurs. They will be 6-6, and I haven't looked at the schedule beyond that point. That's where I think. And you know what? 6-6 through 12 games with all these tough opponents. That's not horrible.
Ooh. Got the Thunder, Pistons, Wolves. I mean, y'all need to calm down. Look at y'all. Y'all should be ashamed.
Although I'm not gonna lie to you,
those games, they don't deserve nothing anyway.
I'm not gonna lie to you though. That stretch scares the hell out of me. If you know the Kings in the past, like how going back to last season, or 2 seasons ago, they got thumped by the Portland or the Detroit Pit. Yeah, it was last season when Corey Joseph decided that he was gonna destroy everybody and give everybody nightmares. Like, those games scare me as a Kings supporter and someone who's watched this team.
Corey Joseph
this year needs to be different.
Yeah, it does need to
facts.
be, but we've seen it for 15 years. I'll believe when I see it. That's where I'm at.
Corey Joseph literally walked into the huddle and said, "These dudes,
give me the ball.
these dudes ain't it. Like, we will just humiliate." Like, Corey Joseph humiliated the entire organization last year.
He did, and I was here for
just the entire organization. Oh, that was disrespectful.
King's Twitter, I love y'all, and I know there's a lot of people in the chatty house who are all about the Corey Joseph slander. I loved the crickets that night, man. Because I was a big fan of Corey Joseph. I know his pitfalls. I was such a big fan of Corey Joseph, and the fact that he did that to the Kings and King's Twitter was so fun. So fun.
Kenny loved him some Corey Joseph also. Podcast tonight? You doing a podcast tonight, Matt?
Absolutely. Podcast afterwards.
All right. Locked On Kings podcast, available now on the Odyssey app, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts from.